Hi. All right. Thank you for coming back. Thank you for attending this really special episode where we're going to get into it. We're going to get into some deeper conversations on messaging, narrative. How do we talk and educate when a social justice situation and crisis occurs? Now, we've been talking about it from the lens as in-house or freelance communication consultants. What do we do within our organizations? What this episode is going to provide us is it's going to, through our incredible guest, who I'll open it up to introduce herself in just a second here, we get the lens of somebody who's working directly within the actual crisis situations as a PR person. Oof. Yes. There we go. So let's get this started. Tiara, please introduce yourself. And thank you for being here.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much for having me. And hello to everybody out there listening. My name is Tiara Tucker, and I am the founder and CEO of Tiara Public Relations Network, which is a boutique firm based in Dallas, Texas, where I focus on PR and brand strategy, communication support, special events, and social and community impact. So I've been in the PR communications industry for decades, including working in corporate America. So I'm really excited to be here with you and to just have a great conversation about a very, very important topic.
Thank you. Thank you. We had the pleasure of crossing paths at PRSA Icon in
Yeah.
October of 2023. And I'm so grateful to you that you came up. I was running a session and you came up and introduced yourself and told me a little bit about the work that you've been doing. And I went, whoa, 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 wait, hold on. You need to be on the podcast. And I'm really grateful for your availability to have this conversation with our folks. So before we get into some of the work, tell me a little bit about your background as far as like what has your path been like in order to get you to where you opened up your own boutique PR firm in Texas?
Yeah, so I like to tell people that I have been in probably the PR communications industry since I was a little girl before I even knew it existed. I was
You could get
always the
paid for
person,
it. Yeah.
right? Like Barbie dolls. I probably was the Barbie's PR agent and didn't know it, right? But I always had a passion for communicating. I always had a passion for advocacy, even as, like I said, a little girl. So over the years, I ended up going to college, Illinois State University, where I
Mm.
received my bachelor's degree in public relations. I received a minor in business, and then I went on to receive a master's in communication. And even during that time, I was very active on campus, in college and, throughout my high school and elementary years. And so I found myself just being the one chosen to maybe host an event or MC an event, or I was always writing about something. And so then I became even more passionate about, like I said, advocacy, right? Just what is right, what is wrong, and not being afraid to use my voice. And so I started my corporate career back in 2004, and I was working for a Fortune 50 company, absolutely amazing company. And I started off working in one department, but I made it very clear to my leaders I want to work in the communications area, in the public affairs area. So when the opportunities presented themselves, I was the one that they looked at. And so I
Good.
started working now in corporate public affairs and on the internal side, and then just learning a little bit about external and internal, but primarily on the internal side of things. But while there, I was also still doing things on the side. And then I eventually decided to give my company a name, right? So I called it Tiara PR Network. So I was able to do things with my company. And then things just started just growing and evolving. And so here we are today. I took a step of faith and I left corporate America. So I am a full-time entrepreneur with my communications and PR firm. And I'm blessed for the opportunities that I've received. Everyone is a learning opportunity and just another way to make an impact.
Okay. So your PR firm, do you specialize in advocacy, social justice situations with different clients, or Do you have a broad but a specialty? How would you describe it?
Yeah, so that's an excellent question, and I used to stress myself out over what's my specialty? What do I want to be known for? And I said, you know what? I'm taking the stress off, right? Who's coming to me and what am I known for? What do I love? And I just took an assessment once and I said, okay, I find that the common denominator in all that I'm doing is impact, community impact, social impact. So I've worked with some of the leading civil rights attorneys on major police brutality cases. I've had people reach out to me regarding various social justice situations. I've also had community leaders reach out to me, and I've helped with political campaigns. I've helped with entrepreneurs who are, say, launching that new book that's going to bring positivity. So, really, the common denominator: business professionals, community leaders, um, advocates, and activists who really just want to make the world a greater place. So, I can't define it with the person, I can't define it with the name. It could be a nonprofit, it can be a small business owner. I just define it by the impact and what we're about to do together to make a difference. So that might change down the line, but right now it's a real happy space to be in.
Excellent. Excellent. And thank you for stepping out and serving in this way. We're going to get into the police brutality work and some of the more challenging situations that you've been a part of and trying to message and to provide narrative and explanation and context and educate with the clients that you've worked with in crisis situations where it's literally a matter of life and death. And before we get into that, I would like to hear, do you have some examples or at least one example of kind of a fun, creative, bizarre campaign that you've worked on as well?
Yeah, so wow, the one that comes to mind, this was years ago, right? I was living in Illinois at the time. I'm from Kankakee, Illinois. So shout out to my hometown and home state, even though I'm living in Dallas now. So when I was living in Bloomington, I know everybody knows her. She's my auntie in my mind, but Oprah, right? So Auntie Oprah was about to launch her network, the Oprah Winfrey Network, right? So everybody was excited. Oprah's going to have her own network. And so they created a campaign, which I think was very clever. So they opened it up for people who want to have their own talk show on the Oprah Winfrey Network. So a friend of mine brought it to my attention. I said, oh my God, I would love to have a show. So I came up with this show idea. I connected with one of my coworkers who is a producer, and so we created this interview and this campaign, and it really was so much fun because the local radio station had me on the air because they wanted to talk about me possibly having my show. My hometown newspaper wrote a front page cover article about me wanting to have my own Oprah show. So it was based on votes. So we created this actually pretty impressive video teaser. People were voting. I mean, I had like thousands upon thousands of votes. Needless to say, I did not win, so I do not have my show with Oprah, but I'm on your show, which is just as good, right? But that was really fun because it just, we pulled together a campaign. It was on social. It was text. It was phone calls. Radio was involved. Newspaper. So it was fun. So little lightweight, but I've had a lot more serious ones that I worked on too over the years.
Yeah, yeah. And I'll be interested to know how you care for yourself as you do this work. But I'm glad, and you really are demonstrating the challenge of most of us as communicators, whether we actually name it or not, is that there's this side of our work that is so fun and can be really creative if we allow ourselves to kind of get into that space of creativity and putting ourselves out there. And then there's the more challenging the challenging issues that really can make a difference on how somebody feels safe or not, or understanding what's happening, and also to kind of mitigate polarization that can happen within company situations. There's also this real beauty that you put yourself as the person who was being publicized. So now you have that kind of first person experience by being the person who is talked about, that's being hyped.
Mm-hmm.
So you know the experience of your clients because you've put yourself in that role. And then you've
Yes.
also been in house in organizations. So you understand internal politics within organizations, struggle to build empires or to get credit and all of the good and the ugly of being within as a communicator in house. All of those skill sets you're bringing to this, to your firm and to your clients. So let's talk about some of the kind of social justice, the police brutality cases that you've been a part of. How did you come upon them, and what is your approach when you start to work with a client to try to understand what happened?
Yes, yes. So the very first police brutality case that I worked on was many years ago, and at the time, I actually was hosting an event. So I was hosting an event on behalf of my PR firm and my nonprofit. I also have a nonprofit, and so I brought in a guest speaker who is one of the leading civil rights attorneys. So at the time, he was known, but he wasn't as known as he is to this day. So I brought him in as a guest speaker, and we were just talking about some of his cases, and it was a very interactive, amazing event. Shortly after the event, the next day, he reached out and said, "Hey, would you be interested in handling PR work for me?" And at the time, I was like, "Oh, I don't know. I don't know. I'll think about it, right?" And so long and behold, I thought about it. He reached out again, and it was really just the timing. At that moment, I said, "You know what? Let's do it." So, what he and I did not know is that on that Tuesday, I said, "Yes, let's do it." So, he gave me my first assignment. I'll never forget. He's like, "I need you to send out a press release and I need you to email." And he started naming like people like Al Sharpton. And I'm like, I don't have their email address, right? And he said, "It's okay. I have them." So that eased the stress and the nervousness. So that was a case that I worked on. This was again Tuesday. Thursday, there was a murder that took place in Dallas. Very high profile murder. I typically don't give names, but um, and then I asked him, I said, "Do you think that, you'll get this case?" And he was like, "Well, I don't know, right? There's a lot of different attorneys that might get it. I don't know." Lo and behold, the family did retain his law office. So I became the PR director. So that next morning, I sent out a press release. And my press release indicated that this law firm was retained and I was the PR director. When I tell you my entire life, it
Mm,
flipped in a moment
I can feel
because
it. Wow.
every local, national network in America
Mm,
and even some
mm,
outside of America, they were calling, they were texting, they were emailing. So I was now in the fire. And, it's one thing to work on situations where, you don't know if media will bite it all, right? But in this situation, I mean, they were all coming and it was very overwhelming. But I was in a space where I felt like, oh, yeah, this is the space that I need to be in because I was able to navigate all of these producers, all of these networks, create and host press conferences. So it was a very um, emotional time because we're still dealing with a murder. We're still dealing with a situation where there are a lot of questions, where there are a lot of angry people because obviously police is involved. But at the same time, we have a family, we have community members. There were so many people impacted, but to just have that opportunity to be behind the scenes, but also in the forefront at the same time was very invigorating. And I learned so much from that very first major situation that I've been able to just bring to so many other situations over the years. So that's how I kind of got my foot into that part of it. And then from there, obviously, there were more police brutality cases, and I would work with those attorneys on those cases. And then I would have other attorneys who would reach out to me. So it's just been a variety of cases. And I feel like my role is to work closely with the attorneys because they are the legal team. But my role is to work with them to to shape the narrative. Because one thing about cases like that, oftentimes you'll find that the first narrative that goes out is that comes from the police authorities, right? So they're the ones who are often putting out the release or putting out information. They may not put it all out. They may put a crumb, a piece, but it's our role to make sure that we're shaping the narrative the way that the public needs to understand it and needs to see it. And it's really important that happens sooner than later, because oftentimes people might follow a case or a situation and they might not. But it's all about how do we get the truth out, knowing that it's still, most of the time, they're developing stories.
And how do you manage that? Because organizations deal with that as well. Something happens initially, but we don't have all the answers of exactly what happened. So, what have you learned through these situations on how to handle something where you need to say something immediately to kind of set the tone, try to get what is known as facts out there, but then keeping up that momentum that you're the source to come
Yes.
back to and to build that credibility? Because I think it's something that organizations can learn as well. It's just how to pace these things out when you don't have all the answers.
Absolutely. So, whenever I'm working on a situation, the very first press release that I send out is one acknowledging who the point of contacts are. And that alone can just, it can do wonders, right? Because in crisis situations, people are reaching out to whoever they can. They'll do a Google search, they will find whoever they can that represents the company, the situation. I mean, I can't tell you how many times they'll reach out to the family that's still dealing with this situation or this loss. So, my number one priority is, let's get something out to the media, and let's let them know, one, if there's a legal team involved, this is who has now been retained. And then also, as far as me, all media inquiries will come my direction. So now we're already adding a little organization. So now from there, they have my phone number, they have my email, they're able to follow us. And then they're, oftentimes I'll get an email or a text saying, hey, please add me to your distribution list. So those are the things that can happen when you at least let it be known these are your points of contact. And then from there, you know, depending on your distribution list, maybe you're sending it to the broad email address. Oftentimes, you're gonna get an email saying this is the person, or this is the journalist that's assigned to this, or they'll reach out and say, "Hey, keep me posted. I'm following the story." And then another thing, that I would do, or my firm, we'll go out there and we'll see who's already covering this, right? Do a Google search. Who are the journalists and the outlets that are already covering it? So we need to get this journalist information, because we're now adding them to our distribution list, because we can already tell that they're attempting to cover the story. So let's bring them on. So that's what I call building my network of the media outlets that I know already have some interest. So even then, that's a good level set. If there is a statement that can be made early on, include the statement. It could be very simple, right? It doesn't have to give a lot of detail. It can be as simple as, we're still looking into all of the facts. We look forward to sharing more information. But again, it's bringing everybody back to you, or to the people that are going to be the representatives. And then also on the other side, it'll bring, um, let's say, the police or the authorities. Now they're watching as well. So that's just one example. And then from there, I would say it's not a matter of quantity. It's not about just throwing out a release, throwing out a release, throwing out a release. It's actually having something to say. And it also takes strategy and deciding what's the best approach. There have been situations where we felt the best approach was, okay, let's have a press release, that lets people know we're going to have a press conference. So now we have a press conference and we're bringing everybody in together. But there have been some situations that I worked on where we said, you know what, let's make this an exclusive. We're going to just do an exclusive interview or situation. And I know not everybody is in favor of that, but there are times where that might be the most appropriate um situation at that time. So it just really depends. But it definitely requires a lot of communication and really thinking strategically on how you can get the greatest impact and the greatest reach.
Now, when you're working with these grieving families and these fired up lawyers, and you know that locally, statewide, maybe even nationally, and as you mentioned, even internationally, people are kind of hanging on information, and you are as close to the source of the victims side of the story as more so than anybody else. You have direct access to the family, perhaps even friends who are in the same area when it happened, et cetera, or impacted themselves. So what are the key things that you're looking for when you are talking to these different parties and listening? What are you listening for that helps you organize into what the eventual narrative is going to be in order to receive the whatever the objective is, justice, whatever justice looks like in those key situations? What are you looking for that's going to create that story, that narrative that you want the public, as well as the police and whoever else is involved, to know, understand, and do something with?
Yes. So for me, I want to know the person. So questions that I want to ask, um, well, what did he or she do? Right? What was their profession? What did they love? What was his or her passion? Because what we're doing, we're going to humanize the person. We want to humanize the person because depending on the situation, and again, I've worked on police brutality cases. I've worked on um, cases where police was not involved, but it still was a victim involved. I've
Mm-hmm.
even had the opportunity, and I'll talk about this a little later, where there was a high profile celebrity who actually was a part of a murder.
Mm.
So he was now on the other side, and there was a victim. So I'm just saying that to say each experience allows me to see things from a different perspective. But at the end of the day, who is this person? Because in most of my experiences, most, not all, where it involved police brutality or a police involved situation, the narrative feels negative, or it feels like there's some holes or some blanks. So people might see a young man who, I'm just going to give an example, a young man in a hoodie, and we think negative. Or a young man, well, what is he doing there? He shouldn't have been there. That's not always the case, right? This person could have been a father. This person could be a professional. I mean, so sometimes what we see is not always the reality. So let's let the world know who this person is. Do we have pictures? If we have pictures, let's provide a picture of this person with perhaps family members, if they are okay with that. And they're not always okay with that at times. So let me add that. It's always about what are they comfortable with. If we want to share that they love, say, art, or they love to sing, or whatever it is, let's share that story and let's start humanizing the person. And then I think it helps uh, the narrative take on a new life because now I can relate. Now this could be my brother, my sister, my child, my grandchild, my coworker. So it's not about what we think. It's about, wow, there's a level of empathy that is involved when we know the person and we can share their story.
Okay. So once we have that established, we know who this person is. They're a real human being. They're not a statistic. And I also hear in what you just shared that you're looking for language that's going to remove these excuses or remove this invitation to
Yeah.
victim blame. That you're
Yes.
looking for ways of like, okay, here's what this person was about, but to try to mitigate potential, like, well, what were you doing there in the first place? Or if you were dressed that way, you're asking for it. These very phobic, sexist, all the
Exactly.
things, racist points of view that can cloud and miss the situation that is actually right here for us to take a look at. So, in any of the
Absolutely.
situations that you've been in, what have there been opportunities where you have added to the narrative, like more of a cultural context or a social context, to educate people about how this isn't just a one-off situation? Has that been a part of your work? And if so, how have you approached that in your messaging and narrative?
Yes, yes. Well, especially with some of the attorneys that I've worked with, I mean, they have a long history of multiple cases or multiple situations. And so that's always an opportunity to perhaps reference a previous situation, or to even mention maybe some of the efforts that those attorneys or that I've worked on in the past. And then what we find is that, as an example, um, and I say this with all due respect, when George Floyd's situation, came out and was revealed, there were many people who, for the first time, were now paying attention. But those that have been a part of this journey and being familiar with more and more stories, George Floyd's story was similar to others. Maybe not the exact same circumstances, but there were so many more lives that were impacted. So that's an opportunity where it's not that people are trying to steal the spotlight, but instances like that bring out pain that other families have experienced. So there are some families that I've worked for and I've advocated for, and when another person is a victim or is murdered or injured, it now brings their pain out again. So now they're maybe sharing their story even more. So it's more of a ripple effect that people may not even understand, but it impacts so many people in so many ways. So I think that's just one thing to keep in mind, that one story probably equates to years and decades of other stories.
And one of the things that I struggle with that you're bringing to mind right now is, what is the hierarchy of why we hear of some and never of others? Do you have any insight to that, of like
Yeah,
why there isn't more of an equality around media coverage when it relates to
that's
these situations? Yeah.
that's a very good question. That is an excellent question, and I've seen it firsthand. I'll just say this: for every one story that you may see that hits mainstream, there's several more. Probably even that happened the same day, to be honest with you. And I didn't understand that until I was actually, heavily involved during one period of time. I think there's multiple factors. I think that, um, for one, it could be on the local level, right? Is this a story that the local media is going to bring to the forefront, right? Is this a story where there's national representation? And what I mean by that, there are some attorneys, and I've worked with them, attorney Ben Crump, attorney Lee Merritt, attorney Daryl Washington, so many more. And I have so much, love and respect for their work, because they work hard. If they, maybe are mentioning, or they're part of a case, most of the time it is going to raise eyebrows. People are going to pay attention to it, but it's because they've done so much work, and that people are following them. And so those are just some examples, but even some of their cases may not make it to that national platform. So my personal opinion is that there is no magic secret sauce. I think some of it is just, it can be timing, it can be the level of interest. Maybe it's something that went viral. Maybe it's something that everybody's talking about because everybody's involved in this story. So now obviously the media is interested. Maybe it could be, because of who's involved in it. So there's so many factors. And I'll tell you, there have been times where I pushed out press releases for cases that would just have you in tears, and they may not get picked up. They might get picked up locally. They might get, a nice little run in the media. And that might be the extent. There have been times where I'll be honest with you, okay? I've reached out to national, like, hey, I hooked you up before. Can you hook me up and get this story out there? And maybe they can, maybe they can't. There have been times where I had a story that was ready to go on a national network interview. We're ready to go, and then a national disaster happens, a tornado or a storm, and it can just push that story out of the way. So there's so many factors of what can happen. And I just think there's no magic. There's no magic. It just, and I've had families that have expressed, well, why can't our story get that type of lift? And it's heartbreaking to say, I don't know, but grassroots efforts still mean a lot. The local organizations that help push stories out, it doesn't have to be in the media to still make an impact. There are community organizations, there are advocacy groups that are still helping to push the narrative, but not everyone is going to rise to the top. It just isn't.
And I think does working with social media, certain outlets or influencers, does that play a role in your comms plan to try to get the word out even in non-traditional media outlets?
Absolutely. I think that with us living in a space of where social media, everybody's on their phone. Let's be real. Some people may question, is a press release needed anymore? Because if you can put it on social and it can go viral and the media's following social or whatever. So I think that the day and times that we're living in now, you know it can be just someone who was a witness on the scene with the video, and that video goes viral. So there's so many other factors now in play. There can be an influencer who now shares it on their page, or a radio personality, or whomever, where even if it never hits a major network, the story can still get momentum. So there's just so many layers, and there's so many opportunities, and I say that in a positive way too, where if someone is struggling with, oh, it didn't get national attention, it didn't get local attention, you know it's okay. Not everything will, but just do your part. If you feel it's something that does need some attention, do your part. Get it out the best way you can. It can be on social media. It can be creating a quick video. It can be a news article. It can be being a guest on a podcast. There's so many ways. It can be being a featured guest at a rally. So there's so many avenues to get a story out. But then also, it's about understanding what is the desired outcome. There are some situations where people may not even want it to hit mainstream. So it's really knowing the client, knowing the situation, and knowing how to best approach it.
Yeah, yeah. I bet that's a key part of what you're working with. And there's the initial situation of the initial, like the murder, so what evidence do we have? Kind of assets do we have to work with to tell the story and back up what we're talking about? And then it could be months or even years later when a trial may happen, and getting people back into the interest of what happens, with the trial, and getting people re-engaged into this story, I assume would be a challenge as well. One of the
Yeah.
things that I love about what you're talking about is that you're putting this information out. You're working on, depending on what the desired outcome is, led by the family, and the kind of information assets, if you will, whether it's videos, testimonials, or whatever it may be, family members that wish to talk, photos like you mentioned. When something happens and an organization is either headquartered there, has an office there, whether it's gotten local attention or even national attention, what advice do you have for how companies can be a part of the solution when these social justice issues that can be polarizing depending on members of the community and their level of understanding the social context, being educated around what's happening, where it's coming from, what's causing it, root causes, etc. What's your advice as far as like the role that organizations should play when you're out there saying, here's stuff you can work with, and here's what we're telling you from the point of view of the family and what we understand that happened to this individual, this human being? What do you want organizations to do with that? And especially to your point where retelling these stories can be quite re-traumatizing for some members of the workforce. So since you've worked on the inside and now you're on the outside, what role does organizations have when these horrific situations occur?
Yeah, wow. So my response is probably going to be a little unique. Might not even be what people expect to hear, but there's so much that is happening in America, in a city, right? And it can be overwhelming to try to attack or address everything. So, as an example, and I'm going to answer your question, but I just want to throw this out there. So, although we've been talking about like police brutality involved situations, which is very tragic, I'll give an example of just two cases that I helped with this year. One involved the Allen, Texas mass shooting.
Mm.
This has nothing to do with the police, right? But now we have a crisis situation where there's an active mass shooter, and someone that I was working with, a client, he was a survivor. So
Mm.
he was shot, could have been left for dead, but this isn't police involved, but it's mass shooting. So that's another topic. So then this past week, I was called in because a young teenager by the name of Keith Slaughter, he was at a party. He's a basketball star, local high school student. He was at a party and he was an innocent bystander that was shot and killed. This isn't police involved. This isn't mass shooting. So I'm giving these examples. Look at the variety and complexity of different situations, all perhaps in the same, DFW community. So is it the company's role to address every single thing that's happening, not including there might be a fire that just happened here, and residents are dealing with a fire or something here or something there? So I do understand that it can be overwhelming to say, well, which situations do we address? Which ones do we attack? That's challenging. But at the end of the day, they all exist. Um, and my recommendation would be, um, just think about the employees, think about the people, right? So, as an example, when I was in corporate America, we had employee resource groups. Some people may call them affinity resource groups, whatever you call them. And I personally, I'm in favor of organizations that have these groups because it allows people to come together. Perhaps they have similar interests, and perhaps they are not a part of that particular demographic, but they want to be an advocate or they want to learn from that group. So it's very open, it's inclusive, but it also, maybe there's an African American affinity group. And so that group might be the group that wants to highlight certain situations, certain efforts to spread awareness and education to other members of the organization as a whole. So I say that to say, I don't know if there's a right or wrong answer, but at the end of the day, I think it's about passion. It's about honesty. It's about what do you feel? Um, because it can be challenging if you take every single thing that's happening. But when it's something that's major, When it's something that is keeping your employees up at night, and if it's something that's keeping you up at night, and if employees are reaching out saying, are we going to address this? Then I think that's your sign. You better address it, because it's a little deeper. And I feel that it is the responsibility of companies, especially if you believe in social responsibility or corporate responsibility or doing your part in the community, that don't just talk about what you're going to do, right? Don't just make that statement, um, because your customers are watching. You know, your employees are watching, and whether you do something internal or you do something external, just make sure that you have your ears on the ground, eyes are watching, and you do something when you feel it's needed. And I know that was a roundabout answer, but honestly, I don't feel it's a one size fits all answer. I felt like, as an example, George Floyd, and I give that one as an example. Everybody talked about George Floyd, rightfully so. If a company didn't address it, employers were probably looking at their employer like, why wouldn't you address that? But I also looked at it like, I'm glad you're addressing it, but what else are you going to do about it? Like, will I mean, what else, right? This happens all the time. We can't just put out one statement and then that's it, you know. So I just think it's deep, and it's about bringing the right people to the table who have the thoughts, the opinions, the experiences, the perspectives, bringing it all together.
Well, thanks for setting up everything that I do with my clients on the depth model, and because you said deep, and being
I know, and
very
it is hard. I wish. I mean, maybe we need to write a book on just that alone, because it's so deep. Like, you know, there's so many things that are hurting people, where, you know, somebody might feel like, well, why did we address that but not address that? But
Mhm.
what about this but not that?
Yeah, yeah. I'm with you, and that's constantly the kind of conversations that I have with clients. Well, we can't say something about everything, and I'm like, well, there's a couple of different ways we can reframe that as a way to stop from getting involved. And I couldn't agree with you more with your statement earlier, where you said is not a one size fits all. 1,000%. That's why we have the model. That's why I do the DEI lens method. It is absolutely, I completely agree with you. And looking at what differentiates ourselves within our external comm strategy. How do we position ourselves socially? What do we attach ourselves to that we can move the needle in a meaningful way, to your point? And you're like, and yeah. And so it answers the and then obviously making sure that we have our employees' backs on the inside. So we're going to cover more things. We need to talk more openly about things internally that we than what we have influence in externally, and differentiating them, finding our space and our role in that. So thank you for that.
Yes. And
Um,
also, I
yeah.
just want to add one more thing too. um there's also a feeling where there might be some people or some, um you know, organizations within an organization where they're always pulled, right? There can
Mm,
be emotional drainage
yeah.
that occurs too, when it's, let me go to this person, let me go to this person, let me go to that person. But
Mhm.
I am an advocate. Bring the voices to the table. It is okay to not know. It is okay to be a CEO, a communicator, the PR person, and you don't know what to say or what to do. It is your obligation to seek wise counsel. Bring in the people who you trust, who will help you make an influential and an impactful and an informed decision about what perhaps you should or should not do, what you should or should not say. It is okay. And it's humbling. And it probably will even make your employees appreciate you even more
Mhm.
when you say, you know what? I don't understand this, but now I want to understand. Let's understand together.
Yeah.
That can move mountains. So it's okay. It's okay to not know. But it's not okay to not know, not do anything, and just act like nothing is happening, and you're ignoring your people too.
There it is, right there. Yes, I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, that's the big lesson out of this work lately, I think, is like you don't have to have all of the answers. You can't know all the things. That's the beauty. That's why there's a D, an E, and an I. So if you're going to be
Yes.
doing messaging that's going to be inclusive of a variety of people's experiences on a given situation, a crisis situation especially, then there's that. Then if you have the diversity, then you're going to have those perspectives represented in order to create the inclusive communications and messaging and container or in a social situation. So excellent advice. So you're an external PR agency, and a lot of our corporate comms colleagues and teams hire PR agencies to give them recommendations for crisis communication situations. Now, I saw there was articles about it that backed it up, but I saw clients who were coming to me saying, our corp comms PR agencies have recommended, like I'll do the example of when Roe v. Wade was overturned. Our corp comms PR agency of record has recommended that we say nothing, so leaders are going to say nothing. And here's my contact is the internal or the employee communicator who's coming to me saying that doesn't feel right. That doesn't feel right. And so this one size fits all, this blanketed, and we have to give better advice than that, and we have to be proactive on our social positioning when it comes to social justice topics and issues, as well as just general diversity, equity, inclusion, communication practices. We have to be better strategically positioned. We have to have a strategy and a framework in place. That's where the depth model comes in. And we can't allow anybody that we have that's going to provide recommendations to us or train us in media training or in crisis communications playbooks, et cetera, to not have a DEI lens on that work. Like that is, to me, is completely unacceptable. Here we are 3 years after post George Floyd. I mean, I wanted it before that, right? But we really don't have an excuse post George Floyd. So, what is your recommendation of what corporate communication teams need to be looking for and expecting and requiring of communication vendors, whether it's marketing agencies, strategy and brand, content, social media, as well as PR agencies that they are bringing in and asking for their recommendations? What what do they need to mandate and require of their agencies in order to put them in a stronger position? If they don't hire you and me, which is the right thing for them to do, that is a
Yes,
fast
it is.
track to getting to much better strategy. But if they already are locked in with other agencies,
Yeah.
what do they need to
Hmm.
demand of their agencies so they are not in a place of disservice by those agencies?
Yes. Wow. I would say, first of all, know that this is your company, your brand. At the end of the day, you know your culture, you know your people, you know your history, and you know your desired future more than anybody that you bring in from the outside. But also, I think that it's important to know that when you are picking a company or deciding on a company, or maybe you already have one, I would ask you, meaning the person or the people, look at that company. Is that company diverse? Is that company somewhat representative of your company? You know, how diverse are they in thought and experiences and culture and different things? And granted, this can be a very small company, which is fine. But even then, it is very critical to understand, what is this agency bringing to the table? Because if you're selecting a very one-sided or very narrow-minded conservative or liberal or whatever agency you are deciding to work with, then you chose that. You made that decision. So when it comes to something that may feel a little, maybe it's a crisis situation, you have to look at, well, how diverse are their experiences to even help me come up with a strategy or a response. But then also look at this company as your partner. When I work with clients, I am your partner,
Mm-hmm.
okay?
Agreed.
Because that's how close I want to be with you,
Mm-hmm.
where I understand your goals, your objectives. I want you to feel comfortable calling me at 2 a.m. because you just learned new information and we're going to think about it together. So I say that to say it's a partnership. Now, granted, maybe you only call this company when something comes up, but how do you feel about their reaction to that? And if you don't feel good about it, and if you're questioning their decisions, and that may not be the right company for you, because at the end of the day, your employees may not even know that you have this external agency or this external consultant. They're looking at you and what you're providing and what you're
Right.
sharing. So make sure you're in alignment with that agency and you value their opinion, and you're also making sure they understand your culture, your perspective, and being able to provide some of your own thoughts as to what you would like the outcome to be as well. So I think it's a partnership, but it's
Great
about
points.
selecting the right companies.
Yeah, absolutely. Who are walking the talk, and that can teach you something around making sure that they're not making recommendations on performative statements, and they know the
Exactly.
difference. That they themselves are not representing a more of a performative team or a performative approach. That they are quite genuine and have expertise in DEI communications, in particular social justice communications. That's really key
Yes.
because, to
And
your
if they
point,
don't,
yeah, go ahead.
yes, I'm sorry, go ahead. I was just going to say, and if they don't, then within their network, they have someone that they can pull in.
Yeah. And that's what I do, is that there's a whole team behind me that I custom put together depending on who the client is, what the scope of the project is. I pull things together in hopes, Tiara, that you and I end up working together. You handle the external, I handle the internal, and then together we do the social positioning. Like there's a way that we work together. We don't have to be a large company to be effective. And that goes to say, with some of the very visible, high visible, large global national kind of brands that we've worked with, we've worked with some pretty big names that I've been the ghost in the machine for, but I always custom curate the projects with clients depending on what their needs are and the makeup of the expertise that I need in the team, which includes personal experiences as well as professional experiences. Um, so
Absolutely.
this has been extremely helpful. So I'm going to ask you this one question. I love to get everyone who comes on Communicate Like You Give a Damn their perspective on what does it sound like or feel like. You choose however you want to answer it. What does it sound like to communicate like you give a damn?
Ooh, like you give a damn.
Yes.
Um, you just you communicate. You speak from the heart.
Speak from
If
the
it
heart.
if it you you share what you feel respectfully, but I just feel like at the end of the day, there's so much going on in the world. There's so many experiences. There's so many things happening, but we're human. Anything happening to someone could also happen to you or your family. So when you're communicating, you communicate from the perspective of, what if this was me? Okay, this isn't me, but how should I react? How should I respond? And I think that when we start communicating like with more empathy, and when we start communicating like our goal, our purpose is to make a positive difference in the world, then you might share something that others may not agree with. But if you're passionate about it and it's positive, then don't give a damn about what you're saying and how others may react. Because if that's how you feel and it's positive, not polarizing, but
Mhm.
even then, there might be times where if you're passionate about it, and just know your voice matters, your perspective matters. Sometimes people need to hear something that they don't want to hear, that they didn't even think they would ever hear in life. But if that thing that they heard or that thing that they experienced can change their mindset for the better, then maybe don't give a damn about saying it or sharing it. But again, do it with respect, do it with love.
Mhm. Yes. Yes, yes, yes. I want to add one more question before we wrap up here and learn
Okay.
how people can stay in touch with you. How do you take care of yourself given the kinds of stories and intimate knowledge that you get, especially through these social justice cases? And they're not cases; they're people. There's families grieving, and there's a lot to it. How do you take care of yourself? How should people take care of themselves based off of what you've learned about how to care for yourself? Because, as you said, it's compounding, and it seems like. And how do you keep up hope?
Yes. Um, it can be hard. I mean, there was a time a few years ago when I was really heavily involved with more of the, social justice or police brutality cases. I'm not as heavily involved now. It kind of depends. There's different types of situations that might come to my table nowadays. But at the time, I'll be honest, it was very overwhelming. It's very emotional um, because there's so many entities involved. And for me, there was a time when I was burned. Like I had nothing.
Mm.
I felt depleted because it can be emotional. It can be a lot of heaviness. But one thing that I learned is that with anything in life, sometimes you do have to pause. Sometimes you do have to take a step back. I like the balance of, I may have a heavy situation over here that I'm working on, but then I might get a message from someone saying, "Thank you for spreading the word about this.
Mm.
Thank you for letting God use you to get this word out." Those are my confirmations that say it's deeper than what I'm doing, because we're a part of a movement that's getting awareness out, that's bringing hope. But then at the same time, I have a lot of pleasure in working with people. Like I said, somebody that just dropped a new book, someone who just dropped a new podcast, someone who just opened a new business, because those are those positive stories that mean so much as well. So it's that balance. Like I don't want to be known for just one thing. I want to be known as Tiara Tucker, the one who wants to help make an impact in this world, whether it's regarding something that's a crisis or something that's beautiful, that gives people hope, wants people to dream even more. And when it comes to the sad stories, I think that one thing that helps me is knowing that we will never understand why a crisis situation happened. We will never ever understand. But if the goal of this family is to say, I want the world to know who my child was, that's the legacy I want to leave behind. Then if telling that story is now going to inspire and impact someone else, then the job is done. It's helping other people more than we even realize. So it's really finding that balance and taking a step back when needed, but just knowing that you are making a difference, one story at a time, one situation at a time.
And with your help, people are going to learn more about and have more awareness around this, and hopefully be able to take it back into their organizations, whether it's through their community outreach and support for employees, or actually moving the needle to force more prevention of, real justice is not, necessarily what leads to a trial, conviction, et cetera. It could be the prevention of the death of the person in the first place. And so putting our
Absolutely.
attention, money, and influence and power into those areas so we can prevent these loss of lives and these grieving families from even getting to this
Absolutely.
point. Protect each other, keep each other
Yes.
safe, and keep ourselves
Yes.
safe in the midst of the
Yes.
work. Tiara, how can people get in
And
touch
vote.
with you?
Vote.
Vote. Yes, absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes. Because, and I know we're wrapping up, but I have to say, I, I, I I didn't realize it until someone brought it to my attention. They're like, I've been on the side of the police brutality where I saw that side of what a family deals with. I've been on the side where someone actually was involved on the other side. I've been on the side of working with politicians. I've been on the side of working with the attorneys. I've had the honor of seeing all the sides, and guess what? They all work together. The community organizations, the community leaders. It's an ecosystem. It's an ecosystem. Everybody has to work together. It takes a lot, but any role that you can play, you can play it. It takes donors, it takes volunteers, it takes advocacy, it takes legislation, it takes so much to make an impact. But how to follow me? Again, my name is Tiara M. Tucker, founder and CEO of Tiara PR Network. You can visit my website, www.tiaraprnetwork.com. You can follow me on LinkedIn, Tiara M. Tucker, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TRM Tucker. And also, I want to also offer a resource. I am the PR and media director for an organization called Love Justice. Love Justice, we are all about focusing on social justice and being a community resource hub, virtual a space where you can go to learn about over 40 social justice issues and causes that you may care about. We provide blogs, news articles, community events. So go to lovejustice.com as well. We also have a podcast. I'm the host of the podcast, and we're bringing in conversations where we're bringing in people who are involved in the social justice space, the DE&I space, and we're going to have these conversations so that we can bring the people to the table and their voice. So I would love to connect with anybody out there that's just looking for somebody else to just be a partner or just have someone just to chat with.
Thank you for fighting the good fight in all of the cases that you've been a part of and within Texas as well. And one of the things I said in that session at PRSA Icon in Nashville this year was, we don't have to do all the things, but we have to do our thing. And when all of us do our thing, everything's covered. So thank you, Tiara, for your work, for your commitment, for your guidance, and for your presence in the situations that you showed up in and pulling people together. Thank you for the work and utilizing communications as a way to bring people together. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. And thank you, Kim, and thank you for all that you're doing. And thank you for a platform like this to allow people like me to share my journey.
So, what popped out to you from the conversation? The more conscious communicators in the world, the better the world. So go to communicatelikeyougiveadamnpodcast.com and set up a one-on-one strategy session. And until next time, let's keep taking care of each other.